In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to go from this to this using Photoshop and luminosity masks. Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we'll be talking about photography. One of the challenges in photography is when you're shooting a scene with high dynamic range. An example of a scene with high dynamic range is when you're shooting with a bright sky and a dark foreground. It can be difficult for the camera to capture in one exposure all the details in the highlights and in the shadows. Now, one thing I like to bring up is that most people's phones these days do this automatically for you. They shoot multiple exposures and blend it to create a nice image where you have a bright, vibrant blue sky, and yet at the same time, you have lots of details in the shadows. Now, most DSLR or mirrorless cameras don't do this. In fact, I don't know of a single DSLR or mirrorless camera that does this today. And so we'll have to do this manually ourselves in Photoshop by shooting multiple exposures on our camera, merging them to an HDR, and then blending those exposures. Let's take a look at how that's done. So here I have three images. One is underexposed, one is properly exposed, and one is overexposed. Let's click on them and open them in Camera Raw. Select all three, right click, and select Merge to HDR. Make sure that auto align is on. Now, a tip, it helps to shoot these on a tripod, but it's not always necessary as long as you have a steady hand. Now that these images are merged into a single HDR, let's dial in the settings that look good. For now, we're only concerned about the foreground and we'll come back to the sky later. Once we have it to our liking, let's save it as a preset. We'll call this Base and open it in Photoshop. Now let's go back to our image and tweak the settings again. This time, however, we're only concerned with how our sky looks and we ignore the foreground. Once we're happy, let's save it as another preset. We'll call this Sky and open it in Photoshop. Now let's click and drag on our sky layer and bring it over on top of our base layer. Now to blend these two exposures, we're going to use a luminosity mask. To do this, let's first turn off our sky layer, select our base layer, and we're going to run a Photoshop action that will generate these luminosity masks for us. I've put a link in the description of the Photoshop action that I've used that I downloaded off the internet. Once it's downloaded, you'll make sure that your Actions panel is open, click on this icon, and select Load Actions. And then navigate to where you've saved it, click on it, and select Load. Now, make sure that your base layer is selected, go to your Actions panel, select Light Luminosity Masks, and hit the play icon. Now, before we go any further, we can see that a selection has been made. Let's deselect by hitting Ctrl D, toggle the visibility for our sky layer, select it, and hold down Alt while we create a new layer mask. And now we have a black layer mask which hides our sky layer. Now let's go back to the luminosity masks and select the mask that has the most contrast between the sky and the foreground. This one looks pretty good. Hold Ctrl while you click on it and that will bring it into the active selection. Now let's go back to the layers panel, select the black layer mask of our sky layer, and then select the brush tool. Let's change the opacity to 100 by hitting the keyboard shortcut 0. Now we'll begin painting in the sky. You might have to repeat the painting procedure a few times to bring it in as much as you want. After I've brought in the sky, something that I like to do is I will deselect by hitting Ctrl D, and I will drop my brush opacity down to 30% by hitting the keyboard shortcut 3. And then I'll lightly paint in the part of the foreground that meets the sky. And I find that this makes it look a little bit more natural and less hyper-realistic. So now we can toggle it on and off to see what difference that made. Now for the final result, there's a lot more tweaking that we can do, which I won't teach in this tutorial, but I'll quickly go over it so you can get an idea of what was done. So here's our base layer. First, I brightened up the bottom left corner. And then I noticed that this wall was kind of a blue color, so I wanted to warm that up a bit. Next, we'll bring in our sky. And then I wanted to clean up the course and make it look a little bit more polished, so I used the healing brush tool to do that. Next, I wanted to bring in the blue of this turf here because in the image it kind of got lost, so I painted that in. The next step was to correct for some artifacting that resulted when we merged our HDR. If you look closely here, you can see some weird things going on with our tree, and that's because the tree was moving between taking pictures. And so I brought in a single exposure of the tree to correct for this. Next, we'll fix the fireplace. And then I added an overall curves adjustment to brighten it up a little bit. One of the final touches deals with the wide range of white balance that we encounter in this photo. Because I was shooting at dusk, the light given off by the sky was a cool blue, whereas these artificial lights give off a warm yellow. So to correct for this, I opened the HDR in Camera Raw and turned the white balance down to a cool blue, then brought that back in and painted it over the bottom part of the image. It's a subtle change, but I think it helps. Then we'll add the logo, and our photo is ready for delivery to our client. And that's pretty much it. That's the workflow I use on almost all of my HDR images. Let me know if you have any questions about that workflow, and I'd be happy to answer them in the comments below. So until next time, happy photoshopping. I'll see you in the next one.